It all started innocently enough. We'd been living in our neighborhood for years, settled into a routine that felt safe and predictable. Sarah, my wife, and I had been married for a while, and although things were not as exciting as they once were, I still believed we had a good life. Our 2 kids kept us busy, and life was moving along at a steady, if not thrilling, pace. Then, one day, a new couple moved in next door. The house had been empty for months, and it had become something of a running joke between Sarah and me, wondering who would finally buy it. When the moving truck finally pulled up, we didn't think much of it. It was just another couple, likely here to settle down like the rest of us. Their names were Ben and Olivia. Ben was about my age, maybe a few years younger, and Olivia was younger still, mid-30s I'd guess. They were friendly, eager to introduce themselves to the neighborhood, and Sarah seemed to click with Olivia right away. It made sense. Sarah was sociable, always able to strike up a conversation with anyone. At first, it was nice having them around. Ben and I started hanging out, grabbing beers on the weekends, talking about work, life, and the usual stuff guys talk about when they're trying to bond. Olivia was often there too, chatting with Sarah, their laughter ringing through the backyard as the 2 of them sipped wine on the patio. Things began to shift, though, as weeks passed. It was subtle, the kind of change you don't notice at first, like a slight breeze that doesn't catch your attention until it becomes a full-blown storm. Sarah started spending more and more time with Olivia. At first, it was casual, coffee dates, quick shopping trips. Then it became dinner at their place, and suddenly it felt like she was always over there, sometimes for hours on end. I didn't think much of it at first. It was good for Sarah to have a friend, especially since I'd been so wrapped up in work. But after a while, I began to notice something odd. Sarah seemed more distant when she was at home. There was a distraction in her eyes, like she wasn't fully present when we were together. At night, instead of the usual talks we'd have about our day, she would go quiet, lost in her thoughts. One night, after another evening spent at Ben and Olivia's house, I decided to ask her about it. We were in bed, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. "You've been spending a lot of time with Olivia lately," I said, keeping my tone casual. She didn't look at me, just shrugged. "Yeah, she's nice. It's good to have someone to talk to." I nodded, pretending that it didn't bother me. But it did. Something about the way Sarah was acting, the way her voice was too casual, the way she avoided my gaze, didn't sit right with me. "Maybe we could do something together this weekend," I suggested. "Just the 2 of us." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sure, that sounds nice," she said, but I could tell her heart wasn't in it. The following weeks felt like a blur. Sarah's behavior became more and more erratic. Late nights at Olivia's house turned into vague excuses about errands or helping Olivia with something. Whenever I asked, she would dismiss it with a quick explanation, something that sounded reasonable but didn't feel right. One Saturday, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Sarah had told me she was going to Olivia's to help with some redecorating project. She'd left in a hurry, barely saying goodbye, and that gnawing feeling in my gut grew stronger. Something was going on, and I needed to know what. I walked over to Ben and Olivia's house. The place was quiet, too quiet. The curtains were drawn, and there wasn't a sound coming from inside. My heart pounded as I hesitated at the front door, debating whether to knock or not. But before I could decide, I heard voices, Sarah's and Olivia's, laughing softly from the backyard. I moved around the side of the house, staying hidden behind the bushes. When I peeked over the fence, I saw them, Sarah and Olivia, sitting close together on the patio, their heads leaned in toward each other, too close for comfort. It wasn't just the physical closeness that alarmed me, it was the way they were looking at each other, the way Sarah's hand brushed Olivia's arm. It felt intimate. I stumbled back, my heart racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. My mind raced, trying to come up with some innocent explanation, but deep down, I knew there wasn't one. Something had shifted between them, something that went beyond friendship. That night, Sarah came home late again. She didn't say much, just kissed me on the cheek and went straight to bed. I stood there in the hallway, staring after her, the weight of suspicion crushing me. For days, I kept my distance, unsure of how to confront her, unsure of what I would even say. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was there, staring me in the face, and I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked up at me as I walked in, a small, almost guilty smile on her face. "Jack, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, too soft. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I sat down next to her. "I've noticed," I started, my voice catching in my throat. "I've noticed you've been distant lately. Spending a lot of time with Olivia. Is there something going on?" Sarah froze, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't deny it. The silence between us was deafening, and in that moment, I knew the truth. The betrayal had begun, and it was only a matter of time before everything would unravel. Sarah looked at me, her expression shifting from surprise to something else, defensiveness, maybe. She sighed and set her phone down, folding her arms across her chest, a subtle wall going up between us. "Jack," she said, her voice calm, as if she were explaining something simple. "You're overthinking this. It's not a big deal. Olivia, she just gets me, you know? She understands things I can't even talk to you about." Her words stung more than I cared to admit. I frowned, trying to keep my voice steady. "I understand you too, Sarah. We've been together for years, and I'm your husband. What can't you talk to me about?" She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "It's not that you don't understand," she said, her tone softening slightly. "It's just that, sometimes, it's easier with her. She's like a personal psychologist to me. I can vent to her about things that I don't want to burden you with. She's been through a lot of the same stuff, you know?" I didn't know. Sarah and I had always been able to talk about anything, at least, I thought we had. But now, it was like there was this whole other side to her that I wasn't allowed to see. "So, it's just that? You and Olivia are, what, just friends?" I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Yes, Jack. That's it," she replied, more sharply than before. "We're similar. We connect in a way that's different from you and me, but that doesn't mean there's anything going on. Why do you always have to make it such a big deal?" I sat back, letting her words sink in. She made it sound so simple, so innocent, but the unease in my gut wasn't going away. If it was really nothing, why was she spending more time with Olivia than with me? Why had she become so distant, so closed off? "I'm not making a big deal out of nothing," I said quietly. "You've changed, Sarah. We've changed. I feel like you're pulling away, and it's not just about you having a new friend. It's like you're different." She scoffed and rolled her eyes, clearly frustrated. "I'm not different, Jack. I'm just tired. I'm exhausted from life, from everything. Olivia gets that. She listens without trying to fix things, and sometimes that's what I need. You always want to fix everything, and it's exhausting." Her words hit me hard, cutting deeper than I expected. All I wanted was to help, to be there for her. But now, it seemed like my presence wasn't enough, like I was just another weight on her shoulders. "I'm your husband," I said, my voice rising slightly. "If you need to talk, you should be able to talk to me. I can handle it. We've always been able to talk, Sarah, but now it feels like there's this wall between us, and I don't know how to break through it." She sighed again, clearly tired of the conversation. "There's no wall, Jack. You're making it bigger than it is. Olivia is my friend, that's it. I don't know why you're acting like something's wrong." I stood up, pacing the room, frustration building inside me. "Because something is wrong. I'm not making this up. You've been distant, you've been lying about where you've been, and now you're saying Olivia understands you better than I do. How am I supposed to feel?" She stayed quiet for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're being paranoid," she finally said, her voice icy. "Olivia and I are just friends, and if I've been distant, it's because I've been stressed out, not because there's something going on. You need to stop overreacting." I stopped pacing, my back to her, my mind racing. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. But every instinct in my body told me something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about stress or friendship. There was something deeper, something she wasn't telling me. I turned back to face her, trying one last time to get through to her. "Sarah," I said, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I'm not trying to accuse you of anything. I just want us to be okay. I miss you. I miss us. Can we fix this? Can we talk about whatever's really going on?" She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. For a moment, I thought she was going to open up, to tell me the truth about what was happening between us. But then she shook her head, a small, sad smile on her face. "There's nothing to fix, Jack," she said, standing up and walking past me toward the stairs. "I just need some space. Stop making this into something it's not." And with that, she disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing alone in the living room, her words echoing in my mind. I sat down heavily on the couch, staring at the spot where she had been. My heart felt heavy, and I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was I really overreacting, or was this the beginning of something much worse? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the tip of the iceberg. And deep down, I knew that whatever was going on, it was far from over. The week crawled by after that conversation with Sarah. Every day felt like I was walking on eggshells, unsure of where we stood or what was really going on between us. But amidst all the confusion and tension, there was one thing I was holding on to: our wedding anniversary. It was coming up in just a few days, and I'd been planning a surprise for Sarah. I thought maybe, just maybe, this could be the thing that would help bring us back together. A way to remind her of who we used to be, before all this distance had crept in between us. I'd booked a table at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, a cozy little Italian place downtown. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it held a lot of memories for us. I'd even gotten her a necklace that I knew she'd love, something simple yet meaningful. I wanted the night to be perfect, a way to reset everything that had gone wrong lately. As the day approached, I kept waiting for Sarah to mention something about it. A hint that she remembered, that maybe she had something planned too. But she didn't say a word. I told myself that maybe she was keeping it a secret, just like I was, and I pushed the doubts to the back of my mind. Then, the day finally arrived. I woke up early, feeling a little nervous but hopeful. I thought about waking her up with breakfast in bed, but she was already out of the house by the time I got up. She'd left a note on the counter, something about meeting Olivia for coffee and running a few errands. I frowned, but I didn't let it bother me too much. She'd be back, and we'd have the evening to celebrate. As the afternoon wore on, I started getting everything ready. I laid out my clothes, made sure the reservation was confirmed, and wrapped the necklace in a small velvet box. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Sarah to text me, to let me know when she'd be home. But the hours ticked by, and there was nothing. By 5 p.m., I was starting to feel anxious. I hadn't heard from her all day, and my mind was racing. I tried to stay calm, telling myself she was probably just busy, that she'd come home and we'd have the night I'd been planning. But as the clock hit 6 o'clock, I decided to give her a call. Her phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice cheerful, almost too cheerful. I could hear people talking and laughing in the background. "What's up?" "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone light, even though the knot in my stomach was tightening. "I was just wondering when you'd be home. I thought we could do something special tonight." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her confusion through the phone. "Oh, I'm actually out with Olivia. We're about to head to the movies and then maybe do a little shopping afterward." I felt my heart sink. She had forgotten. Completely. Sarah, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. You know what day it is, right? Another pause, this one longer, and I could almost picture her face as the realization started to sink in. Oh my God, Jack! She breathed. Is it our anniversary? I closed my eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. There was a rustling sound, like she was trying to figure out what to say, but the damage was done. She'd forgotten, and she already had other plans. Plans that didn't involve me. Jack, I'm so sorry, she finally said, her voice soft, but not quite as apologetic as I'd hoped. I didn't mean to forget. It's just. Olivia and I had already made plans, and. You had plans? I interrupted, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice now. Sarah, it's our wedding anniversary. How could you forget? I know, she said quickly. But it's just a movie and some shopping. We can celebrate tomorrow, right? It's not a big deal, Jack. Not a big deal. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. How had we come to this? How had our anniversary, the day we were supposed to celebrate our life together, become something she could so easily brush aside for a night out with Olivia? Sarah, it is a big deal, I said, my voice strained. I've been planning something special for us. I booked a reservation. I thought we could spend the evening together, like we used to. She sighed on the other end of the line, and I could hear the impatience creeping into her voice. Jack, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know. I didn't think you'd be making a big thing out of it. Can't we just do it another night? Another night. As if this was something we could just reschedule, like it didn't mean anything. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the dinner reservation confirmation on my phone, at the wrapped necklace sitting on the counter, and I felt something inside me break. No, I said, my voice flat now. I don't think we can just do it another night, Sarah. I don't think you understand how much this means to me. There was a silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wondered if she was finally starting to get it. But then she spoke again, her voice firm, almost dismissive. Look, I'm sorry, Jack. I'll make it up to you. But I'm already with Olivia, and we're about to head into the movie. I'll see you when I get home, okay? Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood there in the empty kitchen, the silence pressing in on me. She had chosen Olivia over me. She had forgotten about our anniversary, and now she was going to the movies like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. I stared at the clock, at the dinner reservation that was now meaningless. I thought about calling the restaurant to cancel, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and drove to the restaurant alone. That night, I sat at the table by myself, the empty seat across from me a painful reminder of just how far apart we drifted. I didn't touch the food, didn't say a word to the waiter who gave me a sympathetic look. All I could think about was Sarah, out there with Olivia, laughing, shopping, living a life that didn't seem to include me anymore. It wasn't just the anniversary that hurt. It was everything. The distance, the lies, the way she'd stopped caring. I thought this night would be a chance for us to reconnect, to find each other again. But instead, it only confirmed what I'd been afraid of all along. We were losing each other. And I didn't know how to stop it. After the dinner that never happened, I found myself sitting at the bar, staring into a glass of whiskey. The restaurant was dimly lit, the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses filling the air around me. But all I could hear was Sarah's voice echoing in my head, it's not a big deal, Jack. I threw back the drink, the burn in my throat a welcome distraction from the ache in my chest. I'd lost count of how many drinks I'd had by the time the bartender shot me a concerned look, but I didn't care. Everything felt blurry, my marriage, my life, my sense of self. It all seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a dull, throbbing numbness. When the alcohol wasn't enough to drown out the bitterness swirling inside me, I stepped outside into the cool night air. I hadn't smoked in years, but tonight, I needed something, anything, to take the edge off. The neon sign of a convenience store flickered down the street, and without really thinking, I walked over, bought a pack of cigarettes, and lit one up. The first drag hit me like a rush, the nicotine flooding my system, mixing with the whiskey in my veins. I leaned against the wall of the convenience store, taking long pulls from the cigarette, watching the smoke curl up into the night sky. My mind drifted, unfocused, stuck somewhere between anger and sadness. The thought of Sarah with Olivia, out at the movies, shopping, laughing, living her life, gnawed at me. She'd forgotten our anniversary, our day, and instead, she'd chosen someone else. Not another man, but another woman. And it wasn't even about whether something was going on between them anymore. It was the fact that she had stopped choosing me. I smoked one cigarette, then another, until the pack was half gone. The world around me spun slightly, the ground unsteady beneath my feet. I knew I couldn't drive in this state. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, ordering a taxi to take me home. It felt strange, calling a ride for a journey that should have been with Sarah beside me, our anniversary evening behind us, but instead, I was going home alone. The taxi arrived, and I stumbled into the back seat, slurring the address to the driver. He didn't ask any questions, just drove silently through the dark streets while I leaned my head against the window, the cool glass soothing against my feverish skin. When we finally pulled up to the house, I paid the driver and staggered out. The front door loomed in front of me, and for a brief moment, I wondered what I'd find on the other side. Would Sarah still be awake, waiting for me, ready to talk things out? Or would she be asleep, indifferent to the fact that she'd left me to spend our anniversary alone? I fumbled with the keys, finally managing to unlock the door and step inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. The soft glow of a lamp illuminated the living room, and that's when I saw her, Sarah, curled up on the sofa, asleep. She hadn't even gone to bed. I stood there for a moment, staring at her. Her face was peaceful, but there was a distance between us that I could feel in my bones. The fact that she hadn't waited for me in our bed, the place we used to share so much more than just sleep, hit me harder than I expected. She had chosen the couch, chosen to separate herself from me, even in sleep. The whiskey and cigarettes churned in my stomach, mixing with the anger and hurt. I walked past her, barely making a sound, and headed upstairs to the bedroom. The bed felt cold and empty as I collapsed onto it, still fully dressed. My head was spinning, my mind racing, but the one thing I couldn't escape was the image of Sarah, asleep on the sofa, as if that was where she belonged now. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring up at the ceiling, my thoughts swirling. Everything felt wrong. This house, this bed, this life. The woman I'd built a life with, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had become a stranger. And the worst part? I didn't even know if she cared. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I slipped into a fitful sleep, haunted by dreams that twisted reality into something darker. In the morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, the after-effects of too much alcohol and nicotine lingering in my body. I rolled over, hoping for some kind of comfort, but the empty side of the bed stared back at me. Sarah hadn't come upstairs. The house was silent again, but not the kind of peaceful silence you wake up to after a long, restful night. This was the silence of something broken, something that couldn't be easily fixed. I dragged myself out of bed, feeling every bit of the hangover weighing me down. As I made my way downstairs, I found her still on the couch, but this time she was awake, sitting up and scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when I entered the room. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to say. Part of me wanted to ask her why she hadn't slept in our bed, why she hadn't cared enough to try. But another part of me was too tired, too worn out from the night before, to start another fight. Instead, I just walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table. The silence between us stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, like the space between us had grown wider overnight. Eventually, she spoke, her voice soft but distant. "Did you have fun last night?" The question caught me off guard, and I turned to look at her. Fun? I asked, incredulous. You mean drinking alone at a restaurant on our anniversary? Yeah, it was a blast, Sarah. She sighed, still looking at her phone. I told you I was sorry. I didn't mean to forget. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that it was just a mistake, that she hadn't meant to hurt me. But the truth was, this wasn't just about forgetting our anniversary. It was about everything that had been building up for months, the distance, the lies, the fact that she seemed to care more about her time with Olivia than about fixing what was wrong between us. I didn't respond. What was there to say? We were both stuck in this uncomfortable space, pretending like everything was fine when it was clear that it wasn't. For the rest of the day, we moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary, avoiding the elephant in the room that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I didn't know how we had gotten here, but I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't how things were supposed to be. The tension in the house felt unbearable the next morning, like an invisible weight pressing down on both of us. I couldn't take it anymore. As I watched Sarah move around the kitchen, her face neutral, I decided to ask the question that had been gnawing at me since I woke up. Why didn't you sleep in bed with me last night? My voice came out quieter than I'd intended, but the words hung heavy between us. She paused, her back to me, as if she hadn't expected the question. For a moment, I thought she might ignore it, but then she turned around, her expression carefully blank. I didn't want to wake you, she said, her tone casual, almost too casual, like it was no big deal. You came home late, and, well, you were drunk. I thought it'd be better to give you space. I stared at her, trying to decipher if there was more behind those words. Giving me space? That hadn't been something we'd done before, not like this. I wasn't just drunk, I'd been hurt, and instead of being there for me, she'd stayed downstairs, avoiding me altogether. So, you're giving me space now? I asked, the frustration creeping into my voice. Is that what this is about? Because it feels like you've been giving me space for a long time, Sarah. Not just last night. She sighed, setting down the mug she'd been holding and rubbing her temples, like the conversation was already too exhausting for her to handle. Jack, it's not like that. I didn't think you'd want me there. That's not true, and you know it, I said, my voice hardening. You've been distant for months. It's like you're not even trying to fix this. Her phone buzzed on the counter, interrupting the conversation. She glanced at the screen, and her face softened as she saw who it was. Olivia. I clenched my jaw as she picked up the phone, her voice shifting from the cold, detached tone she'd used with me to something warmer, more familiar. Hey, Liv, she said, turning slightly away from me. Yeah, I'm good. What's up? The conversation continued, with Sarah's voice dropping into a softer, almost conspiratorial tone as they chatted. I couldn't hear all of it, but I didn't need to. My mind was racing, and I couldn't help but think about how often Olivia was at the center of everything now. How she'd become the priority, the one Sarah turned to, the one who seemed to understand her better than I ever could. But as I stood there, watching Sarah laugh softly into the phone, a new thought crossed my mind. What about Ben? Olivia's husband, the man who, as far as I knew, was supposed to be her partner in all of this. How did he feel about his wife spending all this time with Sarah? How did he feel about the fact that their friendship seemed to have eclipsed our marriage? I didn't know Ben well, but he always seemed like a nice enough guy, quiet, reserved. I hadn't seen him around much lately, though, and now that I thought about it, I hadn't heard him mentioned in any of Sarah's stories about Olivia. It was like he'd disappeared, faded into the background. When Sarah finally hung up, I looked at her, a new suspicion forming in the back of my mind. How's Olivia doing? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Sarah shrugged, still distracted by whatever Olivia had said. She's fine. Just needed to chat for a bit. And, what about Ben? I haven't seen him around in a while. Sarah's face faltered for a split second, just enough for me to notice. Oh, Ben? He's busy, I guess. He's been traveling for work or something. Or something? I pressed, the knot in my stomach tightening. You don't know? She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away from mine. I don't know, Jack. We don't really talk about Ben. He's just not around much. The words hung there, and I could feel the tension between us building again. Something wasn't adding up. If Ben was really traveling all the time, why wasn't Olivia ever talking about him? Why did it feel like Olivia and Sarah were always together, like they didn't have anyone else in their lives? I couldn't take it anymore. Later that afternoon, I decided to find Ben. I needed answers, and if Sarah wasn't going to give them to me, maybe he would. I drove over to their house, my heart pounding in my chest, wondering what I would say when I saw him. To my surprise, Ben was actually home. He opened the door, looking just as surprised to see me as I was to find him there. Jack, he asked, stepping aside to let me in. What brings you by? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. But then I blurted out the question that had been gnawing at me. Ben, is everything okay with you and Olivia? Ben blinked, clearly taken aback. What do you mean? I mean, Sarah and Olivia have been spending a lot of time together, and I just wondered, if that bothers you. I haven't seen you around much, and it feels like, like something's off. For a moment, Ben didn't say anything. He looked down at the floor, then back up at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Finally, he sighed and gestured for me to sit down. Jack, he began slowly, his voice steady but resigned, I think it's time you knew the truth. Olivia and I, we're not a couple. I stared at him, the words not fully registering at first. What do you mean you're not a couple? You're married, aren't you? Ben shook his head. No, we're not. It's complicated, but we've never been a couple, not in the way you think. Olivia's a lesbian. She always has been. My mind reeled. I sat there, trying to piece everything together. So, you and Olivia, you're not together? No, he said, his voice calm. We're really good friends, but that's all it's ever been. I'm gay, Jack. We've kept this quiet for a lot of reasons, family, mostly, but Olivia and I agreed to live together and support each other. We didn't want to make it public. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I'd spent months wondering about Olivia and Ben's relationship, questioning whether Sarah was getting too close to her, and now I realized it was never what I thought it was. But then, if Ben and Olivia weren't really a couple, what was going on between Olivia and Sarah? Were they just friends? Or was there something more? As if reading my mind, Ben gave me a sympathetic look. Jack, I don't know exactly what's happening between Sarah and Olivia. But I do know that Olivia cares about Sarah. A lot. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Cares about her how? I think you need to talk to Sarah about that, Ben said gently. But I'm here if you ever need to talk. I nodded, feeling more confused than ever. As I left Ben's house, the weight of everything began to press down on me. Sarah and Olivia's friendship suddenly felt much more complicated, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. When I returned home after my conversation with Ben, my mind was spinning, a mixture of confusion, betrayal, and fear clashing together. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ben had told me, how everything I thought I knew about Olivia and their relationship wasn't real. And now, the question I dreaded asking had taken root deep inside me. What was really happening between Sarah and Olivia? As I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, I sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. I knew I needed to talk to Sarah, but the fear of what I might discover gnawed at me. My stomach churned with the uncertainty of it all. Finally, I got out, walked to the front door, and stepped inside. The house was quiet, and Sarah was in the living room, curled up on the sofa, as if nothing had changed. She looked up as I entered, her expression neutral, but there was something about the way she glanced at me that made my heart pound in my chest. "Hey," I said, my voice more strained than I wanted it to be. We need to talk. Sarah's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't move. About what? I took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. Can you come inside? Please. I talked to Ben, and I know everything. That got her attention. Her eyes widened slightly, and she sat up straight, her body tensing as she set her phone down. What do you mean you talked to Ben? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. I walked over and sat across from her, resting my hands on my knees as I tried to find the right words. I went over there. I needed to talk to him. I wanted to know what was going on with him and Olivia, why she's always around, why you're with her all the time. I paused, watching Sarah's reaction. She shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't say anything. And Ben told me the truth, I continued. He told me that they're not really a couple. He's gay, and Olivia's a lesbian. Sarah's face paled, and for a moment, she looked like she was trying to figure out how to respond. But before she could say anything, I kept going, the floodgates opening now that the words were out. I've been sitting here, for months, wondering what's going on with you, why you've been so distant. I thought it was just stress, or that you were growing apart from me, but now I'm starting to see the bigger picture. It's not about Olivia and Ben. It's about you and Olivia. The room fell into a heavy silence, and Sarah's eyes locked on mine, wide with a mixture of shock and something else, fear, maybe? Guilt? I couldn't tell. I waited for her to deny it, to tell me that I was wrong, that I was reading too much into things. But the denial never came. Instead, Sarah stood up, crossing her arms over her chest, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The air seemed to leave the room, and I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she just said. So, it's true, I said, my voice hoarse. You and Olivia. She looked down at the floor, her arms still wrapped tightly around herself. It's not what you think, Jack. I didn't mean for this to happen. Then what is it? I asked, my voice rising with frustration. Because right now, it feels like I've been living in the dark while you, what? You're falling in love with her? Sarah flinched at my words, and for a moment, I saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. It's not that simple, she said, shaking her head. I didn't plan this, Jack. I wasn't looking for it. But Olivia, she's just different. She understands me in ways I didn't even know I needed. We connected, and I didn't know how to stop it. I stood up, the anger and hurt boiling over. You didn't know how to stop it? Sarah, we're married. We've built a life together, and you've been, what? Sneaking around with her while I've been sitting here wondering what's wrong? I wasn't sneaking around, she said, her voice defensive now. I wasn't lying to you. I let out a bitter laugh, unable to believe what I was hearing. You didn't lie to me? You've been spending every waking moment with her, avoiding me, not talking to me about what's really going on, and you don't call that lying? She shook her head, her voice trembling. It wasn't like that, Jack. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know how to understand it myself. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. So, what now? I asked, my voice quieter now, hollow. What are you going to do, Sarah? Are you leaving me for her? She didn't answer right away, and the silence that followed felt unbearable. I watched her, waiting for some kind of response, but she seemed just as lost as I was. I don't know, she finally said, her voice barely audible. I don't know what I'm going to do. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as the reality of our situation settled in. I had no idea where we went from here, no idea how to move forward when everything I thought I knew about our marriage had crumbled right before my eyes. I think you should go, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I need some space. We both do. Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and sadness. "Jack. Please," I said, cutting her off. "I can't do this right now." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. Without another word, she walked to the door, grabbed her keys, and left the house. As the door clicked shut behind her, the silence filled the space once again, but this time it felt final. I sat back down on the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process everything that had just happened. I had come into this conversation looking for answers, hoping to find a way to fix what was broken between us. But now, it felt like there was no way to fix it. The damage had been done, and I didn't know if we could ever come back from this. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was gone. And I didn't know what was left in its place.